have some amazing stuff for you today. As you know, I'm a big science nerd, and I like to constantly research new things. Two of my favorite magazines, actually, are this one here, Scientific American Mind, some really cool stuff, and Psychology Today. If you're interested at all in learning about why we do the things that we do as human beings, these two magazines will help you understand that. Above and beyond really studying psychology at the university level. So anyways, I'm gonna pull something from one of these magazines in a second, but what I want to talk to you about today is why eating desserts, and a specific type of dessert, can actually help you eat less. That's right. Eating a dessert can help you eat less, and in some cases help you lose weight. So let's talk about that and why that happens. So let me first make reference. You're going to see my eyes kind of drift here. It's because I'm making reference to a couple studies that I'm pulling up on my screen here. So I'm going to make reference to two studies with respect to this topic, and then I'm going to talk to you about a really cool article and a number of studies in this magazine with respect to a very similar topic. So this one I'm talking to you about right now is from the journal Physiology and Behavior. It's from a 2009 study, and what they did is they had 73 subjects, and what they did was that they fed them either chocolate mousse or cottage cheese, and then had them do a computerized kind of a decision kind of test so they're choosing different foods, for instance, like breads, fillings, drinks, desserts, all kinds of stuff. And they had a scale as to how much they liked that food versus how much they wanted it. So I'm not going to bore you with all the complicated details of the study, but I do want to mention the conclusions and briefly the discussion that was found in the study. It's actually really fascinating. So let me kind of put this out to you first of all. Okay, so they had the chocolate mousse and the cottage cheese had the same number of calories. Okay, isocaloric, same in both groups. Now, which do you think would curb your appetite more, chocolate mousse or cottage cheese? Well, most of us would think, well, okay, cottage cheese because it has a higher degree of protein, right? So protein is going to say and more fat, so it's going to satiate you longer, supposedly, and not lead to the whole blood sugar thing, right? Now, I don't know the ingredients of the chocolate mousse. I don't know how healthy it was. I don't know the glycemic index and all that kind of stuff. But what was fascinating about this this study was that they showed that the chocolate mousse, and I'm going to just quote this right from the discussion here. So chocolate mousse, a dessert-specific food item, was liked more and perceived as more full of taste than cottage cheese, a dessert, non-specific, and neutral food item. Chocolate mousse induced a larger decrease in hunger and desire to eat than cottage cheese, although the offered amount of both foods was isoenergetic, so the same amount of calories. These findings can be explained by the higher liking and fullness of taste of chocolate mousse compared to cottage cheese. This is in accordance with previous research showing that palatability prolongs satiation. That's all you need to know from the study. What they're saying here is that because the chocolate mousse tasted better, it tended to make the subjects feel fuller longer. So, relate this back to your own life for a second. Have you ever had dinner? Okay, you've had dinner, and then you feel like you're still not full. Like there's like I go through this as well. We've all gone through this, I think. And you feel like you still need something. You still need dessert. Maybe it doesn't have to be a huge portion, but just something sweet. And this could be part of the reason that this study showed what it showed, is that we need this sense of palatability, of something tasting like really amazing to kind of blow our taste buds to help us reach that satiation point of saying, you know what, I think I'm done now. So it might not necessarily have to be a full-blown chocolate mousse. It might just have to be a small piece of chocolate, which might give you that feeling of satiation because of its great taste. So this was a really interesting study because, again, it goes beyond the physiology of, okay, well, here's what foods do physiologically, but also that there's this kind of reward system that we have in our mind with respect to different foods. So what I'm going to propose to you, and again, this is based on what some of the research is showing now, is that eating dessert can actually be good for you. Okay? Now, let me put a big asterisk beside this and a big kind of warning. Now, there are better types of desserts than others. Okay? Obviously, we're talking about desserts that taste good because obviously we've seen that palatability increases satiation, which is good. So better tasting means longer fullness. But we also need to understand that if we're choosing desserts, we can choose healthier desserts versus not as healthy desserts, okay? So as an example, chocolate mousse. Well, you can have chocolate mousse, which is, you know, any kind of chocolate mousse that you'd find in a restaurant or a store, which is based around lots of sugar, processed cacao, probably some other products that I don't even know of. Or you could try a chocolate mousse like the one that I've put together in Eating for Energy. And I've actually included the recipe on this blog post, so just below this video or above it somewhere, you can get the recipe for that. And you'll see that it's really just natural ingredients, avocado, raw cacao, some sweetener, some coconut action, and it tastes absolutely unbelievable. So if you had a couple teaspoons or a couple tablespoons of this, whenever you felt that urge to get some sweet in, I guarantee you it would make a huge difference for you, because what it's going to do is it's going to give you that reward sensation, so that you're not going to be like beating down your fridge or getting into your freezer or trying to get into the pantry to unlock all sorts of other goodies, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Now, to kind of hit this point home, I'm going to pull up another study here, and this one was done in actually 2011. So even more recent, and this was done in the journal Endocrinology Review. And this one here, the title of this one is Diet Combined with Desserts with a Low Glycemic Index / Glycemic Load Has a Positive Effect on Metabolic Syndrome Parameters in Overweight and Obese Children. So what they did here was they had groups of children, and they fed them different, I think there was like 4 different groups, and fed them different types of different combinations of low glycemic desserts versus just with just the low glycemic diet without the desserts, all this kind of nonsense, whatever. Not that it's nonsense, but let me read you the conclusions from this study. So here we go. Dietary treatments, including desserts with a low glycemic index, helped overweight and obese children to adapt a balanced diet and improved metabolic syndrome parameters. Metabolic syndrome is, you know, obesity and diabetes and all that kind of stuff, such as BMI and systolic blood pressure, and the biochemical markers of insulin resistance, such as fasting insulin and HOMA index. And I'm not too sure what HOMA index is. But anyways, so there we go. So another study, a very recent study, showing that the inclusion of a low glycemic index dessert can actually help you lose weight. Now, they don't really go into the discussion here as to why this might be happening, but I'm going to offer my 2 cents. Just like I did with the previous study, there is this reward mechanism that we have in our minds, and this is why depriving yourself of food, deprivation diets will never work in the long run. Anytime you deprive your body of something, it's going to want to rebel, right? We have, at the time of this video, we have a almost 16-month baby boy. Doesn't seem like a baby anymore. His name's Oscar. At this stage in his life, if you tell him no, if you tell him not to do something, he's going to want to do it, right? He's rebelling. He's trying to do things on his own, and that's fine. And that's you know, obviously it's an important stage in development. But we as humans, as adults, we still have that built into us, where we need to have some type of freedom, some type of, you know, I don't know if you want to call it rebellion. But if we are held back, if we're told not to eat something, we will want to eat it. That's just the way our mind works, okay? So sometimes giving yourself a little reward can be a good thing. Now again, we want, as this study just showed, a low glycemic index dessert is probably better. So again, the recipe that I've provided for you on this page is a great example of a lower glycemic chocolate mousse, okay? So again, you're getting that satiation because it tastes really good. It's a lower glycemic index food, so it's not going to shoot up your blood sugar, and you know, you get to enjoy dessert. So give that a shot, and there we go. So dessert can be a good thing if it's the right kind, because again, I'm not going to sit here and endorse pie and donuts and all kinds of other nonsense, which sometimes in the past I've indulged in a little too much. But again, there are healthier alternatives to each of these different, you know, different options that we have at our disposal. Now, before we finish here, I want to pull up this Scientific American Mind magazine, and I want to allude to another really interesting article, and they're talking about, here we go, perils of paying for status. And this is a really interesting article because in the article it talks about how they've done studies and they found that when people feel not so great about themselves, they tend to spend more money or buy bigger things to feel more important. Interesting, right? Very interesting. So there's a marketing professor, his name is David Dubois, out of Northwestern University, and what he found was he theorized that, okay, well, if people don't feel great about themselves, if they feel more, and again, this fluctuates on a day-to-day basis. Some days are better than others. So what he theorized is that if people feel unimportant, maybe they'll make food choices, or they'll choose bigger food choices. So let me give you an example. You go to the movie theater, and like this would be almost 1.5. Well, more than a liter. Okay, so this is just water, obviously. But if you go to a movie theater, this would be a small. Okay, so you get a liter of pop. This would be a small. Just as an example, you can't even get a popcorn for this size anymore. It would just be like 10 times the size, and that would still be a small. So what's interesting is that if you go to the movie theater and you feel like crap, right? You're not in the right headspace. You don't feel too good about yourself. Based on this research, the likelihood of you buying a small versus a large is not going to be as great. So you're going to actually, because you feel crappier about yourself, you're going to choose a larger food item, and obviously, maybe to feel more important or whatever it is. So the idea here is that you don't want to make these food choices when you're in a poor, crappy, depressed state. Okay, so we've all been there. The idea is to, as best as possible, try to get yourself in a good, positive mental state before making food choices. So therefore, you'll choose smaller portion sizes as opposed to the bigger ones. So just let me go back to the study for a second. So they designed an experiment, and what they did is they instructed participants to either imagine themselves as a high-paid boss or a subordinate worker. Okay, so the high-paid boss is up here and the lowly worker is down here. So again, this is totally imaginary. And what they were then instructed to do was to choose between a small or large container in which to eat a serving of pizza or smoothie. Now, in either case, the amount of smoothie or pizza was the same, so the only difference was the container size. And what they found is that the people who were imagining themselves as the employees, so down here, were significantly more likely than the pretend bosses to pick the large container, even though the amount of food was the same. So, again, the idea here is that when you don't feel great, you're better off avoiding making these food choices, because the tendency as human beings is going to be to choose bigger things, bigger sizes, right? Again, it could be because, based on what's presented in this article, so that we feel better about ourselves, more or less, okay? So why am I bringing this up? Well, again, it comes back to desserts, right? So we talked about, okay, well, desserts can actually help you lose weight and give you that feeling of satiation. However, right, you don't want to go to the pantry when you feel crappy about yourselves, because sometimes that will lead to the wrong decisions, and more of those wrong decisions in terms of choosing more of a particular food or bigger portion sizes, okay? The other thing is that when you feel better about yourself, when you feel good, when you're smiling, when you're feeling good about life, you tend to make healthier choices. So again, if you have the chocolate mousse on this page versus a ready-to-make crappy chocolate mousse, the tendency might be to go for a crappier chocolate mousse or go to McDonald's and pick up a sundae. Okay? So all of the stuff in the video today is all about thinking about food, desserts in a healthy manner, but also realizing that there's stuff above and beyond our physiology which dictates how we choose our food sometimes. So I find this stuff really fascinating because, kind of as a health coach and what I do, a lot of, what I'm trying to get across to you guys is that what's up here is just as important, and if not more important, as to what we put in here, okay? Because a lot of times what we put in our mouth is dictated by what's going on up here. So we need to be in the right headspace in order to make the right food choices a lot of times. So anyways, let's just recap. Eating desserts is good for you if they're low glycemic index foods, if you have a small portion of those desserts every now and then, okay? Because again, that great taste, that dessert, that thing you're craving, if you don't satiate that craving, over time, that can lead to rebellion, which obviously would lead to eating more and more and more. Again, you want to make these choices when you are in a positive mental state as best as possible, so that you choose a smaller portion size that will obviously not expand your waist. So there we go. Hopefully you found this video as fascinating as I have. and hopefully you got some really good take-home stuff out of it. And that's all for today. If you've got any thoughts or comments, let me know below on the blog, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.